So moving along, our next presentation is fairly timely in that we have seasonal load restrictions on right now, but Scott Green from our Utility Coordination Permits and Agreements area, along with Dick Endress, our Chief Geotechnical Engineer, are going to talk about the development of a tool, Freeze-Thaw model-based seasonal load restriction decision support tool. So take it away, guys.
All right, let me know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you and see it. Yep.
Great. I had that issue earlier. So, going on here about the seasonal load restriction decision support tool, and trying to advance the slide. Hold on 1 second. All right. People might ask, well, why do we need a decision support tool for seasonal load restrictions, and why Michigan needs these weight restrictions that we put on the roads in the spring? Is, as the slide states, to protect our investment in the public's investment in our highway, and then also to minimize economic impact and damage to the roads. So, as this graphic demonstrates, each spring, the frozen roadbed begins to thaw and it saturates the roadbed down below. And the frozen ground below prevents that water from either draining vertically or actually transversely out from the pavement, underneath the pavement. And at this time of the year, the soft roadbed is highly susceptible to damage during spring, more so than any other time of the year. So MDOT during this time frame, we implement what we call a seasonal load restriction or spring weight restrictions, also known as frost laws, commonly in the trucking industry, which allow only legal axle weights on our all-season routes. And then we also do not issue overweight permits during this time period, and we don't issue oversized permits greater than 14 foot wide. When they're greater than 14 foot wide, they tend to run on the shoulders more, which typically are a thinner pavement section. And that's, as pavements are drained transversely, that's where the water's kind of collecting down over there. So it weakens the pavement structure. So as I said, we put these on to protect our road beds, but it also disrupts trucking routes and also impacts the economy, because as you're moving these oversized overweight loads and just regular loads in general, when you limit the roads they can travel on and the weights they can travel, then it definitely impacts the economy. So it's critical to put on spring weight restrictions and remove them at the right times. And the seasonal load restriction decision support tool, it's one of many tools we actually use when we go to achieve these decisions. One of them is frost tube readings, where our maintenance forces and our contract agencies, they go out and they check and record the level of frost and thaw within the roads, and they record them into a GIS tool, which we developed as MDOT, or also on spreadsheets. A lot of times we receive from local road agencies. One of the other tools we utilize are field observations of the pavement, such as is the pavement weeping, it cracks, or pumping, and also checking the roadside drainage. One of the issues we ran into recently in the past few years with the Great Lakes being so high, a lot of the receiving waters of the state just weren't allowing the roadside to drain as quickly as it used to. And then also we utilize models, and first one we use typically is the FHWA model. I believe it was developed in the early 80s, and takes into account the weather forecast and thaw and freezing index days, so for freezing days and thawing days based on temperature. Kudos to our Minnesota folks. We also steal from them as well. We have been for a while for the Minnesota model, which also takes into account that the sun stays out longer as you get further in the season, also helping with the thawing of the pavements. And then our MDOT SLR application, which is specific to Michigan, taking into account our soils and our climate, and utilizing our some of our other devices that we have out there. And some of our data sources here. Picture looks fuzzier now on the screen, but as our MDOT RWIS system, the environmental sensing station. So this upper left corner picture where it shows the tower and the fenced in area, it's one of our environmental sensing stations. And one of the things that those have are temperature probes, sometimes located in the shoulder, sometimes a little bit further off the shoulder, but it also measures the temperature to a certain depth at each one of those stations. Something else we utilize for these are the DSLR, the SLR decision support tool app utilizes our weather forecasts, commonly available ones such as like a Weather Channel or whatnot. We also use that during our day-to-day conversations about setting these seasonal load restrictions, spring weight restrictions. And then our frost tube data also goes into that application as well. And this decision support tool then serves as a gathering place or consolidator of all these various data sources. So on the screen right now is just some screenshots of our seasonal load restriction decision support tool app. The upper left-hand corner is a plot that it does, our map of Michigan, that shows the degree of SLR completion, or these seasonal load restriction completion, which takes into account, like I said earlier, the actual thaw and freeze indices, and those are based on degree days above and below freezing temperatures. The lower left-hand corner down here, you'll see some dates on there. This is example data. It actually does a prediction of when seasonal load restrictions should be placed and when you might be able to take them off. Now, obviously, this software will predict a date, but then you have to verify it with field observations, because temperature may be good, but it may not be all drained out yet based on field observations. Then the lower right-hand corner over here shows how we can get more granular with the data. We can go down to zip codes. If you know zip codes in the area, it'll do a prediction for that and degree of seasonal load restriction completion, or it can do it by county. And then in the upper right-hand corner, it's which models, what other parameters you want to use, whether you want to use metric or imperial units for temperature, whether you want to use the FHWA or the MDOT 2019 model. And then the start and end date, those are actually the analysis period, not necessarily the dates that you would set the seasonal load restrictions or take them off on. So this is just, you can stretch this out over years. And shown here is a map of ROS stations throughout the state. You can see there's some gaps within that that may not have been filled in, but it takes into account this decision support tool. If you were to go to each individual environmental sensing station out there, that wouldn't be timely for us to be able to analyze the data. And then when you throw on top of that, the next slide, we show all of our frost tubes. So that kind of fills in a lot of the pieces and puzzles of how the state's thawing. And to analyze all these one at a time and try to get some analysis, it would not be practical. By the time we got that all analyzed for the first go round, it'd already probably be June, and frost laws would be taken off. So so this just kind of shows the how big the data puzzle is and what the reasons for developing this tool were. So yeah, so the automated calculations that the tool will provide saves times and allows basically for quicker and a more thorough validation of the data for setting and lifting seasonal load restrictions, and they'll provide a more complete picture of how the Michigan in general is thawing, especially considering like the Minnesota model, you have plain conditions on one side of the state, a little bit of lake conditions on the other side. In Michigan, we're surrounded by water, and that definitely affects how we thaw. And some other potential uses, it could be used as a repository for freeze-thaw cycles over multiple winters. That's the great thing about this, that it can start tracking that data more. We get asked many times, how often or what are the usually start dates for spring weight restrictions in a certain area of the state? And best we can do is go through our old press releases. Now we would have a tool to actually help us track these. And then we can model freeze-thaw cycles for specific sites where there may be, issues that need to be addressed. And it can be utilized potentially for pavement and infrastructure design, such as bridge foundations, which this study takes off of another study that was performed by Michigan State for a freeze model. If I remember correctly, it was for a foundation issue for freezing and thawing. So, and the next steps we have with our SLR application, it's still a prototype. We've had some issues with the prototype. I won't sugarcoat it. The system was hacked at one point in time, which kind of after we finished with the initial with the research study, and that kind of shut it down. And then we had some issues with getting the data updated from our RWIS servers because they change every few years suppliers of the data. So we had to make sure we get those APIs. To get that information from our environmental sensing stations into the SLR app. We have to get those, so that takes some time. So our next steps going forward are we need to determine what the best operation and maintenance strategy is for this SLR application, and taking into account budget and available resources for that. And that is all I had for that, and I have no idea what time it is, but I think we're running pretty close. I'm open for any questions that might be out there.
Not seeing any come in at this time, Scott, but if you can kind of keep your eye on that chat, we'll let you know if anything comes in.
All right.
All right, thanks, Scott. Appreciate that, and I really appreciate the coordination that we've had the last few years with the local agencies around the state. I can tell you, weight restrictions, they're a big deal, obviously, to those that transport, and when they come on quickly, they can catch people off guard. But I think our communication has gotten a lot better over the last few years, and at least from where I'm sitting now, and I'm going to knock on wood, I get much fewer calls on those types of things anymore. So appreciate that, and appreciate that we're going to actually have some real analytical tools in order to help us make those decisions. So thank you.